political panel. Amy Lutz and Eric Benna stopped by to talk a little bit about the upcoming election. Let's go ahead and take a look at what they had to say about Mr. Romney and Mr. Obama.
Thanks, Willie. We're sitting here now with Amy Lutz and Eric Benna of College Republicans and College Democrats. Thank you guys for coming back on Mondays in Midtown. So the election, right around the corner. Yes. Starting with Sandy, that recently came through. There's been reports of it messing with voter turnout. What do you think the effect is going to end up being on the polling places?
I'll go. I think, you know, it really is a horrific storm. I think it's, I think between 50 and 80 million, I don't know if you know the answer, but it's really one of the most damaging storms. And it's really a horrible thing to see in our country, especially right before the election. I think, you know, obviously the first thing we need to worry about is rebuilding efforts. I know that both Chris Christie and President Obama are out there, you know, making sure that people are getting back to their homes, making sure they're getting rebuilt. So that's the most important thing. But as far as, you know, election turnout comes, I think it'll definitely affect it. I believe at this point there are about 8 million people without power still. And it's going to be an issue. But actually, I'm going to be a poll worker tomorrow. So if anybody goes to the BSC, I will be there. But during my extremely boring training, I learned that, I mean, they have to go on with the election regardless, unless Congress passes some sort of, you know, regulation or mandate that says we're going to actually move the date. They have to go on with the election. So even if they have to, you know, just do paper ballots, they're going to have to do it. Now, generally the East Coast tends to go far more Democratic. I still think it probably still will go towards President Obama. But if you know, something outside the box happens, if for some reason Romney wins by several points, I know it's going to be a huge legal battle. So it'll affect the polls, it'll affect the turnout, but I don't think it's going to necessarily affect the election too much.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would agree with that. I do think that it disrupted early voting. I know a lot of states affected have early voting, and the constituents that tend to vote early are tend to vote Democratic. They tend to vote early more. So I think that could have an impact on turnout for sure. But like Amy said, as far as the actual election result, I don't think it'll have a huge impact. It is a very devastating storm. I think maybe one effect that it has is, you know, brings the issue of climate change to the forefront, and maybe voters are going to be thinking about that when they go to the polls. So that's just an added, you know, facet to the election day, the issues that climate change, you know, hasn't really been that present in, you know, the election cycle so far. So then, you know, now with this storm, I think it's definitely going to be on voters' minds. So. Great.
And a couple of the local issues, starting with Proposition B, the cigarette tax. What do you guys think are the key aspects of this proposition, and do you think it'll pass? Do you think it'll fail? What's going to happen?
I think that it'll pass, and I am for the Prop B. You know, it raises tax on cigarettes, and the proceeds are going to a fund that will be dedicated towards education. You know, it's not a perfect law. I mean, the cigarette tax will be, you know, regressive in people who, you know, are poor, or people who, you know, are smoke that are, you know, they can't. It's hard to just stop smoking overnight. You know, they're going to really be hit by that tax. But I think in the long run, you know, Missouri has one of the lowest cigarette taxes in the nation. In the long run, you know, the cigarette tax will be good, helping people over time will stop smoking. Obviously not in the immediate, but over time stop smoking, and then the proceeds from this tax, increased tax, going to education, helping Missouri's education system, which is evident in places like St. Louis, needs a lot of help, and you know, also education in schools to stop people from smoking in the first place. So.
Okay, I think Prop B is a very interesting proposition, because this is actually something that's been proposed at least twice in the last 5 to 10 years in the state of Missouri, and it's failed. But this time it does actually appear that Prop B is leading in the polls, and there's a good potential that it will pass. Personally, I am against Prop B. Funny story, my dad actually owns a convenience store on the Kansas side, which kind of leads me into one of the biggest reasons I oppose it, is because the low excise taxes in the state of Missouri tend to drive business into this state. Now, if it gets higher, I believe they're proposing at 90 cents will be the eventual tax, and in the state of Kansas it's about 79 cents right now. So that will actually drive business to my dad's convenience store, which is right on the Kansas side of the border. So typically, lower excise taxes bring money into the state. Higher excise taxes, push business away. So it's not necessarily a good thing for the state of Missouri. I think, like you said, cigarette taxes are regressive, so they will tend to hit people who are poor most often. And it doesn't necessarily mean that people will stop smoking. I mean, first off, people with higher incomes, if their cigarettes increase a couple dollars a pack, then they'll probably still keep smoking. It also increases the potential for black market smoking. I know that there was a case last year somewhere on the East Coast where they actually busted a black market ring of cigarettes from people moving between different states going for the lower price of cigarettes. So. I mean, on the surface, it looks like a good thing, but in the end, I think the revenue boost will be temporary. I've gone back and looked at the budgets for several different states when they've done this in the past, and they gave them a temporary boost, but over the long run, it actually went down. So I don't think it's the best choice to raise taxes, especially during an economic crisis when people are out of work.
At the same time, though, from a public health perspective, the end goal of over time, decreasing smoking is very worthy. And in terms of excise taxes pushing business away, in St. Louis specifically, across river in Illinois, the cigarette excise tax is much higher than here. So at least on this side of the state, there's not going to be much people hopping the border to go get cigarettes over in Illinois. So.
Not as much, and I will just add one more comment on that. And this is my libertarian side coming out. So I personally am against increasing taxes or putting punitive actions on whether it be cigarettes, whether it be soda, whether it be anything like that, trying to curb people's behavior. Because what happens is people are gonna, some people might decrease their smoking, not because they want to decrease smoking, but because it costs more. So the trigger to stop smoking is the higher cost, not the desire for health. So I think, if we want to put money into the state for cigarette, because personally I hate cigarettes. I hate cigarette smoke. But if we want to put money into this state to decrease that, I think we need to put it more in the area of education and helping people get off cigarettes on their own, having them make the choice to get off cigarettes.
So moving on to some of the other elections, a local election that we haven't talked about yet that is very important for the state of Missouri, the governor race. Dave Spence and Jay Nixon. It seems pretty close. What are your thoughts on this race? How is it going to go?
I think, while Spence, has been doing fairly well in the polls, I guess, I don't think he has much of a chance of beating Nixon. I think, Governor Jay Nixon has one of the highest approval ratings of any governor across the country. Under his leadership, Missouri's brought in a lot of foreign companies, that type of thing. Missouri has a AAA credit rating, which, compared to Illinois across the river, Missouri's credit rating is I think it's only 2 or 3 states in the country that still have one of the best credit ratings, and a lot of that is from across Jay Nixon. Jay Nixon is a Democrat, but he's also from Missouri, and he's as far as Democrats go, he's a moderate Democrat, and he's definitely a son of Missouri, and Missouri is what he's passionate about. He's from here, he grew up here, he went to school here, he is one of Missouri's own, and I think that, Spence is as well, but I think, whereas I think there'll be a lot of ticket splitters, people who might necessarily vote for Romney, will still vote for Jay Nixon just because of his Missouri draw, and also there might even be the same effect with Claire McCaskill, Todd Akin race. People might split their ticket for Romney and then vote for Claire McCaskill, but I think we might talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I think the governor's race is interesting because, like you mentioned, Claire McCaskill, I think one of the reasons why Nixon is doing a little bit better is because he doesn't have that tie to President Obama that Claire McCaskill does. And I think, honestly, as we've seen in the past, people are trying to distance themselves from the president right now because there is such a pushback on some of his policies, some of which Governor Nixon has also done. I think, if I recall correctly, Missouri is one of the lowest states for job creation in the last 4 years. It actually hasn't created as many jobs as we would like. So it'll be interesting. I disagree slightly on the fact that I think there will be people who vote for Obama and then just vote Republican straight down ticket. I really think that will hurt all the Democrats in the state race. I think that there are also a lot of grassroots, a lot of organizational efforts to get Nixon out of the office. Actually, as Missouri College Republicans, as a state federation, we just launched a radio buy this week, which actually, if you listen to Top 40 stations, you will hear my voice talking on 107.7. So, I mean, there certainly are efforts to get, shameless plug there, I apologize. But, I mean, there certainly are efforts to get Nixon out of office. I think it'll be close. It will not be, however, there will not be the gap that you see between Romney and Obama in the state of Missouri, because at this point, Romney is definitely going to take Missouri. It'll be interesting to see, though, if that trickles down to the governor's race.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, though, I feel like I said, Governor Nixon is a son of Missouri, and he has been involved in Missouri politics for a long time. He's a very, accomplished leader here in the state. I believe he was Attorney General for a long time, at least 10 years, something like that. And Dave Spence, while he was, a business owner, he's still relatively kind of an unknown in the state. And there was some controversy about him saying, his campaign saying that he had an economics degree when in reality it's a home economics degree from Mizzou. So I think that could hurt him in certain places. And as far as Amy had said, Romney being very far ahead in Missouri polls, while I don't disagree that I think Romney is probably ahead right now, I feel like the margin is actually not as great as it would appear in the polls, just based on who the polls are reaching. I feel like there are a lot of voters in the city of St. Louis and Kansas City, certain parts of the city, urban areas that aren't necessarily counted in those polls. And I think if they turn out to vote, it could be a much closer election than people think. And I mean, in 2008, it came down to 3,900 votes, somewhere around there. And so I think, and the spread, was similar to what it is now. So I think, I think that it could be a lot closer than people are anticipating.
Interesting. So the always contentious and very interesting Senate race we've had. Claire McCaskill, Todd Akin. What's it going to come down to?
I think it'll be very close, actually. Akin has narrowed the polls a little bit, but obviously we saw that gap emerge back in whatever August when he made that comment. But I think what Missouri voters have seen is that it's not necessarily fair to hold Akin 6 seconds against him instead of Claire's 6 years. Claire's a big supporter of President Obama's policies, and she's done several things that aren't necessarily positive for things that voters aren't going to want to know when they get into the voting booth. I mean, I know her husband has actually been accused of negotiating deals in the Senate dining room with stimulus funds, which is not something that we want to do. And obviously she's a big proponent of Obama's huge spending policies. So as I know this isn't a verifiable source or anything, but phone banking myself, making calls to people, there have been a lot of ticket switches. People saying, I wanted to vote, or voting, Obama, but then voting for Akin, which is really weird. You would not see that coming. And actually, originally, Akin was not on the phone call list, and he's actually been put on it now. So he definitely has a little bit of momentum. I think it'll be close, but at this point, it's too tough to decide.
I mean, I think there's no way that Akin could win. I mean, and honestly, I feel like that's amazing to me that you've heard people voting for Obama and then voting for Akin. I feel like if that's true, I mean, I know certainly the opposite is true. People are going to be ticket splitting. People will be voting for Romney, and then they cannot stomach the man that is Todd Akin, and they'll be splitting their ticket voting for McCaskill. I know, even though he's tightened the polls overall, he's still way down with women. And it's not. He's also, his case isn't being helped because he can't live down that comment he made because his friends in other states, his contemporaries in other states, are making similar comments to what he said. And anytime another Republican politician in another state makes a comment that disparages women, it's just added to the roll of sound bites which was kicked off by Todd Aiken's infamous quote. So I think he's just not going to be able to live that down. And if people are splitting tickets, which, I mean, the Democrats will be voting for Claire McCaskill, and Republicans who are splitting tickets will be voting for Claire McCaskill. And I really don't think that's a gap that Todd Aiken can overcome.
Oh, and then the big election everyone's been waiting for. Final thing, who's going to be our president?
I'll go with this one. So I think the last time we went was actually before the first debates. Am I correct?
Yes,
okay,
it was.
So we have not talked about the debates at all.
We've had a long break. Yes.
I think the first debate is absolutely going to be the most important debate when it comes down to the election. I think that for the longest time before that first debate, the Obama campaign was somewhat successfully presenting Mitt Romney as this kind of out-of-touch, elitist businessman. And at that first debate, we saw that that wasn't true. He was the one who came out swinging. He was the one who obviously won that debate. I don't think President Obama really even showed up. And when you look at the three debates in their entirety, immediately Romney came out of the park. He was very aggressive. Second debate, they were both very aggressive. And then the third debate, Romney pulled back a little bit. And I feel like he was very much more comfortable in his position than he was in the first debate. Now, if you look at the polls, again, since the first debate, Romney has had, I think, 14 or 15 days above 50% in Gallup, I believe. So he's actually polling very well, and no candidate who has ever been above 50% in that, at all in the month of October has ever lost. Now, polls, there's only about an 9% reception rate. Not many people actually answer the phone when you make these calls, so you can't really trust polls too much. But you look at the precedent that people in the past who have, again, been above 50% have not lost. And Mitt Romney definitely has the momentum. I think that voter turnout for Republicans will be very high, very similar to what we see in 2010. President Obama will not have the turnout that he had in 2008. So I think that the momentum is with Mitt Romney. I think the Obama campaign is panicking a little bit, especially when you see some of the ads they've released recently, which are just kind of completely off the wall. And I think right before the election, the hurricane has affected some things, but Benghazi is definitely going to be a big issue. I think that people are not impressed the way that the president handled that, and if that continues to develop, it certainly will be something on people's minds when they enter the voting booth tomorrow.
I think that, I disagree with Amy, obviously. I think tomorrow, at the end of the day, President Obama will still be our president.
Early morning.
Well, that's correct. And, I think that, the debates were, in all honesty, I think the debates are pretty inconsequential. I think the majority of the people that watch the debates have already made up their minds. They just are looking to see how their candidate did. And I do think there were some people that were persuaded by the debates just because Mitt Romney has sprinted to the middle from the farther right positions that he took in the primary to secure the nomination. So I think if the Romney if you were tuning in for the first time and the Romney you saw in the first debate is the Romney who you think Mitt Romney is, then maybe that did persuade an undecided voter will persuade an undecided voter to cast their vote for Mitt Romney. But I think people that have been watching and following it know that Mitt Romney has changed his mind a lot of times. A lot of people don't know what he actually believes. And President Obama is still, when you're just looking at the candidates, he has the type of leadership and the convictions of what a president of the United States needs. Whereas Mitt Romney, I'm convinced that maybe he doesn't have any beliefs. He's just willing to say whatever to get through the day. So I do think that turnout is going to be key. Republican constituents do turn out, but what I think is underestimated is the grassroots nature of the Obama campaign. They have huge grassroots organizations in all the key states, and that is certainly going to influence turnout. And I think, I think Republicans and just people in general kind of underestimate voters that they think, someone who voted for Obama in 2008, their life's not that much better, the economy's not much better, they're just going to jump ship. I think people underestimate people oversimplify to think that they just, some voters didn't get what they want, so they're automatically just going to stay home and not vote. I think there are a majority of voters, at least that I've talked to out in the community, that, while they recognize, we still have ways to go with our economy, they haven't lost faith in President Obama, and that they truly believe that President Obama is the leader that we need to carry us through and to secure the future of America.
Wonderful. Amy Lutz, Eric Benna, thank you very much for joining us again on Mondays in Midtown. We'll have to see what happens tomorrow. I know we'll be watching, and hopefully we'll get you back here after the election to unpack what happened.
Definitely.
Back to you, Willie.
Thank you for that look into this year's political election, Amy and Eric. We're only a day away from Election Day, so be sure to get out and vote. Episode, we want to remind you that if you have any story ideas or anything you'd like to share with us, comments or concerns, you can email us at mondaysinmidtown@gmail.com. Or if you'd like to go back and watch old episodes or watch this current episode again, you can like our Facebook page, Mondays in Midtown. For the cast and crew here at Mondays in Midtown, I'm Willie McKenna. Thank you for watching this week's episode.